Today is Friday, and we have our lunch and learn with our very interesting speaker today. And we've got Anant Kamath, who is a biotechnology executive, scientist, and attorney. Interesting combination of degrees there. And he has 2 decades of experience building and leading innovative life sciences companies. He is currently co-founder and CEO of ORF Biologics Incorporated, where he directs global biologics development using advanced expression platforms. Previously, he co-founded and served as a CEO at Cellular Engineering Technologies, where he pioneered stem cell media formulations and did many other wonderful things, of which he might tell us today. His work led to multiple commercial products distributed internationally and patents in stem cell reprogramming. Anant has extensive experience cultivating global partnerships with academic institutions, biotech, and pharmaceutical companies. He has negotiated licensing deals, guided technology acquisitions, and established worldwide distribution networks. He's been an invited speaker at major international conferences, including the World Congress on Regenerative Medicine, the International Society of Stem Cell Research, and BioJapan. His multidisciplinary training includes a Juris Doctor from the University of Iowa College of Law, a Master of Science from Johns Hopkins University School of Public Health, and dual undergraduate degrees in microbiology and biochemistry from the University of Iowa. So let's give our warmest welcome to Anant Kamath here. Anant, your turn.
Well, thank you very much, Irina. I should hire you as my personal relationship agent because that's the best introduction I think anyone has given, even one that I couldn't make up in ChatGPT or any other AI. I just want to thank Iowa State University first for giving me the opportunity to speak this afternoon, and for all the individuals who are lurking and eating their lunch, which I'm honestly disturbing probably. But I think that this talk will be very interesting to many of you because I always hear this refrain from the general public or people who come up to me at cocktail parties and say, so, I've got this lab thing going and I think it's going to be a big, big deal. How do I start my own company? And as soon as I start opening my mouth, I know that they wish that I wouldn't have done that because then I'm in their ear for about 2.5 hours and they really desperately need to go home. So this talk is designed for undergrads, graduate students, postdocs, faculty members, and anybody who has a burning desire to set up their own shingle and see how to make it float. I can't say that I have all the solutions to your problems, but I can at least speak to my own experiences to try to make you avoid the pitfalls that I experienced in my own journey. So the title of my talk today is called Beyond the Bench, and is essentially an extension of what you would be doing in your lab to make your lab discovery a company. So this is a roadmap for entrepreneurs and scientists and how you can succeed in the respective fields that you potentially operate. So I just want to quickly start out with a roadmap of my presentation. And essentially, I'm going to work you from concept, which is your idea, to company. I will also show you how we built up our own company, which is what is called a CDMO in our parlance. And the CDMO just essentially stands for Contract Development and Manufacturing. So essentially what that means is we take other people's ideas and we produce a deliverable and we deliver that on time and on budget. And then we will get into kind of the semantics of whether you really want to do this. I can tell you that this is a game that is unforgiving. It is expensive, it's financially intensive, and potentially can impact your relationships with your significant other or your family members. And I've seen all of these things come to the fore, and I just want to be honest with you and ask you this fundamental question: do you really want to do this? And I think that will be answered in a few slides, and you'll see some of the factors that are involved in making that decision. So a little bit about myself. I'm not a traditional student. You should probably not do what I did, which is take the long walk or the journey to discover who I was. When I was younger, I felt that I could do anything, and perhaps that was a stupid and naive understanding. I applied to dental schools, law schools, medical schools, MBA schools, graduate schools, you name it. If there was an application that was involved after undergrad, I probably filled it. The sad part about that is that I got into most of those programs And that made it a bigger mess because then I really didn't know how to clarify myself or distinguish myself into what I wanted to do. I think it's much better, especially if you're a younger person listening to this talk or you listen to it on, recorded, that you have a pathway mapped from what you're doing in your undergraduate years to your graduate years or medical years, and then towards entrepreneurship. I say that because then you get a longer bandwidth into running your company. You're much younger, you're more physically fitter, and you can handle more of the financial impact it will take on you, because nobody will pay you, a six-figure salary at your first company when you're scraping by to raise funds. So eventually, at least for my own experiences, I wound up finishing my master's degree, as Irina said, and I also did my JD. The reason why I didn't do a PhD and a postdoc is because when I did my work, which was in my mid-20s and later 20s, I knew that if I had gone down the pathway of a PhD plus postdoc, it would have taken me at least 6, 9, 10, 11 years. And by that time, I would have aged out in terms of entrepreneurship or even partnering with people who wanted me in a meaningful capacity. So right after I graduated from law school, I took the bar, passed it, and I started at a startup company called CET in 2005. And I was with that organization for 19 years. At CET, I essentially ran the day-to-day shows in terms of manufacturing products in the stem cell industry. We work with stem cells from blood, cord blood, mesenchymal stem cells from bone marrow, adipose tissue. And eventually, my colleague and I, who was sitting next to me, wound up creating, I believe, the first iPS stem cell lines in the state of Iowa, the first robotic utilization of stem cell isolation products, both from Stem Cell Technologies and Miltenyi. And we created numerous iPS cell line models for specific diseases, both in the rare disease space and for people with common diseases. Along those lines, we also developed commercial products that were sold by Hyclone. I was the OEM developer for all of Hyclone's media, Fisher Scientific, and Avantor, which used to be VWR. Along the lines, we also got a patent for how to reprogram iPS cells so that you would get more fully reprogrammed colonies in a shorter period of time. Unfortunately, what happened with CET is that my co-founder was diagnosed with liver duct cancer in 2023, and he wound up passing away in 2024 in April. I stayed with that company to essentially wind down operations till about August of 2024. But essentially, my core team and I left to do our own fundraising and start this clean sheet company called ORF Biologics. Essentially, what we wanted to do at this company is negate the mistakes we made at CET and have more of a financial and also scientific freedom to do what we wanted to do to scale up this present company. By the way, if you have any questions, I'm inaudible or too low in volume, etc., please just stop me and ask, because I want this to be interactive and not a lecture. I'm sure you get enough of those in your due course. So essentially, you should ask yourself, and I think all of you know within, every company starts with a scientific insight. I'm not in any of your fields, and I have not been acquainted with most of you. I think Hussein, I know you from LinkedIn maybe, or some prior communication by email, but the rest of you I do not know. And so, you are your best steward of your own ideas. You know your field better than anybody else, and you should never allow other people to dictate what you know. You have the scientific insight, and you have the spark to start your own companies. But when you do start your own companies, the central question you should ask yourself, whether you're selling children's toys or you're selling scientific widgets or even a service, is, are there unmet needs or inefficiencies in the market you're trying to service? Everybody has an idea, and chances are with 8 billion people on this planet, your idea is not unique. Certainly the ideas we have are not unique. We are here to fulfill an unmet need and a niche that other people cannot fulfill. And that is pilot scale production of custom biologics. And what do I mean by that? Everybody wants proteins made, whether in the animal space, vet space, antibody fragment space, et cetera, et cetera. But not everybody can afford Cytiva or Samsung or a other GMP facility that wants to do 1,000-liter fermentation run as a pilot project. One, because it's prohibitively expensive. Two, it takes a long period of time, both for gestation and production. And three, you never know how your protein's going to pan out when you get to an animal model or even an in vitro test. So we realized that people, lots of people, want 5 liters done or a 1-liter shaker flask. They want just a little bit of the product, so they can do extra crystallography. They want to do mass spectrometry. They want to do downstream testing that they're good at. So they didn't need what I would call vat size productions, which you would see Genentech or Sanofi or AstraZeneca or those type of places. They wanted modest production of these key biologics made. And that's the space that we operate in. So everybody here who's listening to me probably has a spark in innovation, and you should pursue it. But on a piece of paper, just write, what is the pain point that you are trying to solve, and does that pain point actually exist? So what is the vision for translating something that you have in your head or on a piece of paper to an actual bricks and mortar facility? So the first thing you want to do is you want to translate your science into impact. And what you will learn as an entrepreneur is, unless you have a rich uncle, your last name happens to be Musk, or you have people that shower money on you because you have entered and exited 4 or 5 big companies. Money is tight, and especially if you're in Iowa. And I know that people are logging in from everywhere, but if you are generally in the Midwest, people are conservative with their spend in terms of investor money. So if your goal is to raise 20 million or 100 million for a Series A round, you better have a lot of patents around you. You better have people who have been in your field for years, and you better be known as a known quantity. We had none of that. So we had to do with modesty. And since we started, we have become a revenue positive company within 6 months. In our business, the keyword, the mantra that we always have every day is scale. Because we know that for us to go from a company that is modest to a company that is stable, that can employ people, drive economic growth within the state, and also make more money, we need scale. Now, I will tell you that you want to combine this innovation with commercial discipline. Unlike grants, and even grants these days, everything in the commercial business costs money. And generally speaking, you should add a 2.5x factor to it, because if you want to budget 100, chances are the thing's going to cost you 250. And this is just on GLP production. Your own field might have different margins of operation, but everything boils down to money. And I'll give you an example later in my presentation on the IDT model. I think most of you have heard of IDT. Just in terms of my own story, I started out in biochemistry at Iowa in 1987. And there was a professor named Joe Walder who used to teach half the day in Bowen Science Building, and then he would put his Orthodox Jewish hat, and then he would disappear to some place in Florida. And at lab meetings, people would whisper and say, "What's Joe doing? Why is he doing that junk? Where is he going?" Well, it was a garage. It was a garage at the Oakdale campus, literally with an iron metallic door that was raised up and down by a chain. And that little metallic door garage company was IDT. Since then, Joe has now passed on. IDT has different leadership, but got sold to Danaher Corporation about 4 years ago for $2.3 billion with a B. And so now the Department of Biochemistry, which laughed at Joe in 1987, has a Joe Walder Award where IDT throws a couple $1 million to them per year. And now suddenly IDT is considered to be, something that they're very proud of, because they knew all along that it was going to work. It's funny how these things come and go, but the one take-home message here is keep the cash spent on the low side and don't listen to naysayers, because you can do it if you have a vision and you have a goal that you want to come true. But as I said with my IDT story, you want to have a clear and distinguished business plan, because investors will say, okay, I want to cut you a check, but you need to tell me exactly what you want to do and how you're going to do it. And then when your company starts, you can one fine day say, well, I'm not going to do that, because that's usually how reality works. And I'll kind of give you the IDT story, and I'll give you our story. At IDT, when Joe Walder started this company, it was the height of the HIV hepatitis epidemic. There was a test that had been developed to look at HIV infections and HIV presence in blood supply, but it was very poor. And there were people who were literally dying from AIDS from blood transfusions. A couple of big names like Arthur Ashe and Isaac Asimov, a science fiction author, died of AIDS, believe it or not, from blood transfusions given during operations or surgery. And so Joe's first product was the combination with Baxter, which is a big company in Chicago, to develop an artificial blood substitute. It had nothing to do with oligonucleotides. The whole point was that this blood substitute was not real blood, so it could not be contaminated with viral products, including HIV. And you could transfuse that because there were no antigens that could be cross-reactive. So it was essentially a universal donor type of material that you could transfuse. So they took this product, Baxter and Joe, and they went to Europe and tried to do clinical trials in humans. While the problem is that this caused blood clots in these individuals, and these individuals died not because they were, inoculated with the virus that eventually took their lives, but because of pulmonary embolisms or blood clots that were forming in their body based on transfusion. So Joe, being Joe, he was a brilliant human being, and he realized in 1993, when the Nobel Prize went to Kary Mullis for the invention of polymerase chain reaction, that PCR and sequencing, which was coming up in most labs, needed a primer. And so these primers were essentially these tiny oligonucleotides, 20 to 30 base pairs of DNA that were made using organic chemistry. So Joe went and bought a couple of these machines that essentially made oligonucleotides. Well, fast forward 5 years, and PCR became a household name. The patent was owned by PerkinElmer at that time. And Joe went from that tiny garage, in Coralville. And when I moved back in 2000, my mother told me, hey, there's this big giant building that they're building right near Walmart, and it's a biotechnology company. And I told my mom, I said, why would somebody be building a biotechnology company next to Walmart? And she goes, no, you should go check it out. And that big giant company happened to be IDT, and so IDT went from modest beginnings to now becoming a billion-dollar player. And now IDT is doing the same thing with their innovation in the CRISPR gene edit space, which they poured a lot of money into. And now even small companies like mine have a relationship with IDT, even though we're very dissimilar, because they believe in our vision and they believe in our scale. So, our logo or tagline, which says relentlessly innovative, actually means something to us because we have to innovate to stay alive. And I think that as an entrepreneur and as the bright individuals that you are, you will realize that this will become essentially your life, and you need to budget that consideration into starting your company. You cannot do this on some sort of ad hoc basis where you have other interests, etc. You just have to do it. You have to live it. The first thing I purchased when I started this company was a couch. And I purchased that couch because I knew that if I have to spend the nights here, I have a place to sleep. Thankfully, it hasn't gotten that, but for some months it was touch and go. And so I was like, if I have to do it, I'll do it. But the thing you need to do is you need to align your dreams, put it on paper, and build customer confidence and investor interest. Because the one thing you will see when you start these companies is that fundraising never stops. It's much like you applying for grants in academic spaces. You get an R01 or you get SBR, STTR, but that takes you for 2 to 5 years, and then you reapply because that cycle never stops. And here, fundraising never stops until and unless you have an IDT event. And then the number of Lamborghinis in Coralville has gone up by 5. So, so we know who made money and we know how they're spending it. But, every time I run into an Italian exotic, I'm usually in, awe because I know it's those IDT people that people laughed at in 1987. So what do you do in terms of raising money? The whole thing is you cannot sell people on just an idea. You need some data. It doesn't have to be a lot, but it has to be some. And most of the people that I'm speaking with, I'm sure, have their own labs on campus, have their own technology transfer offices, etc. And you can work with those individuals to either file a patent, a trade secret, a trademark, some sort of IP protection, some sort of partnership agreement where you can shop your idea with some data. The reason why people funded us is because they knew we had done this before at other places, and we didn't have any intellectual entanglement in terms of not for compete agreements and those type of things, which I'll talk about also. But we had done some market studies and we realized that there was a market for biologics. We would have never gotten into this game if there was no customer. You must have a customer. No, your customer doesn't have to be an academic institution, but it can also be a B2B contact. It can be a service agreement. It can be a CDMO, hybrid CDMO, whatever you want. But you must have somebody who says, if they made that, we would be interested. And so we have been doing that in terms of outreach pretty much every day since we really got our bricks and mortar since January. So the take-home message here is get early validation. If you have a grant like SBIR or R01, etc., that's great. I mean, then you're home free because people know that you have the pedigree to do this work. If you don't, take a small portion of your budget and channel it towards your entrepreneur goals and get that data as quickly as possible. Similarly, begin networking. Now, I'm not familiar with the Ames area except for the restaurants. So I do know where the best restaurants in Ames used to be at least 10 years ago. But, it's a great town like Iowa City. And I'm sure you have your own entrepreneur ecosystem that helps you make contacts. And so begin informal networking, even if you don't plan on floating a company. Because one day you will have those people on your side to make things work. Now in Iowa City, we have things like Million Cups, which might be at your location also, which is run out of Kansas City. We have local economic development through what they call Merge here, and which used to be the Iowa Economic Development, and now it's called Greater Iowa City. And then, speak to anybody and everybody on Zoom, Teams. There are places like Crunchbase, there are places like Gust. If any of you have, more of a vested interest in really pursuing this further, I'd be happy to work with you to point you in the right direction. And so, even if all of you are asleep today during lunch, one day in the future, you might say, oh, remember that one dude in October who told us about that company? Is that guy's presentation still available, or what was his name? Because I think now is the time I want to actually do this thing. You don't have to do this today. I'm not going to evangelize you on starting your own company, but all you need is one believer. We had a few. We had people who didn't understand science at all, but they believed in the people. And really, that's what you want. People should believe in you as an individual and as a human being, and the rest will flow. So now I'm going to kind of wear my lawyer hat and kind of teach you maybe what the goals of starting a company format are. Many people, and I see this all the time, whether they're ma and pa and they want to, sell toys on the internet or candy or, whatever, want to be a sole proprietor. I cannot stress how bad this is, both for tax reasons and for lawsuits. Do not be a solo proprietor in running your company. It's a terrible decision to do. Terrible. Either start out as an LLC if you're small, or start out as a corporation if you want to become larger in scale. We had a professional investment team. We had professional attorneys from law firms who do this for a living. And even though I understand contractual law, corporate law, and tax law, I'm too busy at the bench to know the fluencies between Iowa tax code, the C corporations, and all those type of things. But I do know that if you want to make this a real business, your corporate form should be a C Corp, and you should incorporate it in the state which you're most familiar with. Many people think that they want to be the next Boeing or the next Embraer or whatever, and they have to incorporate it in Delaware. Unless you have $10 million in terms of your Series A round, I would strongly urge you to stay away from Delaware. You can incorporate it in Iowa and pay very little money, and you can keep that corporate form, federally speaking. And here's the fun thing: if your company doesn't work out, you can change your corporate form to an LLC. The one thing I can suggest to you as academics, if you do want to start this thing, talk to your tax transfer office, but make sure you know what you're signing. When I was leaving my last company, and this applies to people who left with me, which was the entire staff, the first thing the new CEO said is, hey, I'll give you $10,000 if you sign a not for compete agreement. And I just laughed at his face, and I left it on the desk, and I said, I won't be coming in the next day, so I'm done. And that happened with other people also. Not-for-compete clauses these days are essentially being obviated by federal legislation, and there's probably good case law to support the fact that they're probably unfit and constitutionally illegal. But if I can urge you one thing, do not sign on for compete agreements, because it'll make your life a living hell. And I've represented people who have done that, and it has ruined their careers. That being said, if you want to spin off an academic asset, I would be in contact with their tech transfer office. They're generally very helpful people. They will shepherdize your discoveries, help you file patents. More importantly, they will help you pay for your patent. Patent lawyers are not cheap, and generally speaking, it'll cost you $35,000 to $50,000 for patent fees to issue. Not to mention, every 3 years you'll be paying for patent maintenance fees. So unless you have deep pockets, you want to be cognizant of where your discoveries are made. The second thing is, at least at Iowa, and it's probably true at Iowa State since you're all region schools, is that if you discover something in an Iowa State lab, much like you do at Iowa, those rights belong to the university. And so when we did our work, we did not work at a university affiliated institution. We were separate and distinct as an entity from that particular location. So you might have tech transfer fees, or you might have a royalty payment, or a back-ended licensing deal that you will have to carve out with Iowa State University or whomever your tech transfer entity is based on the discovery you've made. So, one thing that investors will ask from you is, do you have any IP? That doesn't necessarily mean you need an issued patent, but you can apply for what is called a provisional application for patent, which is very inexpensive, and then gives you a priority date. These type of things are important because investors generally don't like to cut checks for ideas. They like to cut checks for grants and intellectual property that you have. So apply for provisional applications for patent. And if you need assistance with that in terms of just mulling it over, I can help you. Also, hire a business accountant. I cannot stress this enough. Having a wad of crumpled receipts in your pocket for stuff you bought on your own credit card is not the way to do business. That's great if you want to do something from your garage, but all of you must be more sophisticated than that. Hire a real accountant and make sure your money works for you. In our particular instance, we put excess money in short-term certificate of deposits because they're high yielding, and we can move it around to our operational account as and when we see fit. These are very boring slides. They're very dense slides, but if you print them out when you start your own company, they will be very helpful for you so you don't make mistakes. So again, not to beat a dead horse, but IP is everything. Apply for provisional applications for patents. You can do it by yourself. You don't need an attorney. It takes 20 to 30 minutes. All you need is your title, where you're applying for, a brief description of your invention, and it takes like $200. The real patents, utility patents, which you will apply for, generally take up to 5 years to issue. So apply early, get that priority date. And the patent life is 20 years, and you're going to be paying maintenance fees every 3 and 7 years, and they're substantial. But, if you don't have a patent, somebody will send you a cease and desist letter or a violation of a license letter. And unless you're the only gift that God has on this here earth and the only tech that you and only you have, chances are somebody else is doing something similar. And the last thing you want is that letter to show up at your door or for you to go to court because they're going to sue you. So, no man is an island, no woman is an island. It doesn't matter how brilliant you are, you need people. I always call myself the dumbest person at my company because I have good people who take care of my stupidity. And that's true. You must have, if you're a scientific entrepreneur, you must have a scientific team. In our instance, we have people who can handle molecular biology, protein antibody production, purification, consultants, business teams, people who know people who are connected within the field. And then we have people who have a shared culture that I can trust and execute. And by that, I mean that not every day in your business is going to be a great day. That only happens on television. Most of the days are what I call cathartic scream fest, where you kind of decide where things are going, how to fix it. Because each day, and this is a real event, when we moved in January, the neighbor church next to us decided that they were going to put water through a sprinkler system that should have been inerted with gas. And so one fine day, my colleague comes up to me and she goes, "I think the ceiling is falling." And I was like, "What do you mean the ceiling is falling?" And our vestibule literally had drywall falling with a waterfall. So, we had to wait till the fire department showed up to shut off the main water main because our lab had converted from a lab to a tiny swimming pool. And this was because somebody made a unilateral decision that affected the entire building because we're in a shared facility, based on their, actions. And so for 3 months, we had Serpro fans running at like 200 decibels, not to mention people who are dealing with mitigating damage, drywall, flooring, et cetera, et cetera. And we could have packed it in. I could have just said, "Look, I'm going to practice law. This is insane." But we showed up, in February when we had to keep the doors open. So we had a little ice dam that had formed on our door because the doors had to be open to ventilate the water that was inside. And so, these things now are in the past, but they happen. Whatever you want to think as your worst possibility happens. And I've wrecked in my life many, many, many pieces of lab equipment, some unintentionally, some by mistake. But these are things that you should just anticipate and roll with it. And so you need good people to essentially surround you so you can take this damage. I have people who help me with everything. And, I want to recognize them even if I run out of time, because without them, I would never do this. I would quit because people who think that they're solo entrepreneurs are just simply deluded. You need people who can help you. You can be the CEO of anything you want, but ultimately, you need their assistance. Location. So this is something that you guys might actually be privileged that we did not have a choice in. When I worked at CET, we had room to work with what is called a BioVenture Center, which is a purpose-built technology incubator space for science companies. I believe Iowa State has something similar. I know a friend of mine is now cannibalizing the basement of the veterinary school, so good for him. And then another person is, I think, on the research park, because essentially my old company closed shop in Coralville and moved to Ames because their principal scientist lives in Ames. So if you have incubator space, that's the best place to get it, because generally it's pretty cheap. They have shared equipment that you can utilize, so it reduces your spend. And you can also bounce off ideas of other people who can assist you in things that you probably didn't ever know. The thing about it is that there are multiple avenues now where you can reach out to people. We use LinkedIn all the time. I don't know how many people of your caliber are on LinkedIn, but we use LinkedIn Premium, and that has done all of the difference, because there are a lot of people who are in my field from my institution who reach out to me on LinkedIn. The second thing is to have a proximity to your academic partners and customers. In this manner, we're very lucky in Iowa because most of the incubator space is either co-located on the campuses of their respective institutions, or they're pretty close to, your campus. Way back in my past life, in my past company, I did collaborate with Iowa State. I used to collaborate with Vic Dalal, who used to be in the physics department on an indium tin oxide electrode. I worked with a retired faculty named Michael McCloskey on basophils that we used to sell to ISU. And I used to work with Don Sakaguchi on some stem cells in the mesenchymal space on neuronal differentiation. So I remember these names vividly. Vic is a family friend of mine, so I know he's happily retired. And I think Mike has moved back to California. But I'm also familiar with the Surya Malapragada and Balaji Ramakrishnan, because Surya's graduate student was actually trained by me at CET when she had just gotten out of high school and was at Iowa State. So she was my summer intern, and then she worked with Surya after she got done at ISU for her graduate school. So we're located in tiny Tiffin, Iowa. If you ever come to Johnson County, I guess the best thing we can say is it's next to the high school where Ashton Kutcher went. So that's kind of our claim to fame, and we have an ice cream shop. Hussein, did you have a question? Or are you swatting flies? But we repurposed a medical clinic to start a company. And so it just happened that a physician had set up a large practice here and then decided to go to Florida because of family issues. And so we had a purpose-built facility where we converted examination rooms into discrete labs. And it worked out really well for us, because when we tried to move in, the BVC, which was the incubator space, had already been spoken for. And then, they want some linkage to U of I, which we don't have. And so we had to basically be a self-contained company, which has actually worked out better for us. And then the other thing is that, the one thing that it also allows us, it allows us the freedom to operate the way we see fit, and the freedom to expand is the way we see fit, because this is now our facility and not shared. So there's a plus and minus to being in a shared facility versus being in a facility that you own or have for yourself. Excuse me. So for us, at least in terms of core capabilities, our lab, we produce proteins, we produce antibodies, we produce monoclonals, all those type of things that service other companies. We can produce them in E. coli, Pichia, CHO, HEC, Bacillus, and baculovirus. So essentially, every industrial system that is, carte blanche for what I would call a larger biopharmaceutical production, we can handle. We do pilot runs. We are not a scale-up company, and so I have a slide here in terms of talking about Iowa State's facility, which we might also potentially utilize in the very near future to do GMP production for animal health. But we handle all aspects of gene design, the synthetic biology, codon optimization, construct evaluation. We have a self-contained lab where we can produce concentrate, purify, lyophilize, and deliver. And we do that on time. We have multiple projects that people want done, and we can do all of the bioavailability characterization, including ELISA and cell-based assays based on our background. The one thing that we did, and I think that, you should do, because I think it'll save you a lot of time and effort, is invest a lot in equipment. And when you invest in that equipment, try not to buy it. Try to get leases on it. Try to find people who can depreciate your cost over time. Because if you try to buy expensive equipment and you have a very skinny raise, you will run out of money and bandwidth very quickly. My colleagues who are very facile in this business have helped me both make money on CDs based on the principle that we still have left, and also to lease equipment so we have a longer runway. And always, as I tell people, if you're in Johnson County and you're bored and you've suddenly gotten lost because you've gone to the east side of the state and you're in Hawkeye territory, come visit us and we will give you shelter. But we're friendly to all schools. So funding pathways. Everybody wants to know, how do I fund my company? Again, the rich uncle story doesn't usually apply to most of us, and so you will have to raise money. One source is the federal government, and that source is SBR and STTR grants. Now, unfortunately, Hussein, do you have a question?
Yeah, I wanted to ask,
Yeah,
so how many people are right now active with the ORF Biologics, or
sure. We have 7 people here at my company.
okay, and all of this are concentrated mostly in the Tiffin location, but you do
Yes.
have also space in BioVenture Center,
No,
right?
we don't operate at all in
Okay,
Malaysia.
okay.
No, my prior company did. We don't have any space there, but we have 17 large industrial partners who can handle different aspects of production and scale up. And in that sense, we also have a worldwide distribution network for product sales, and now more than enough CDMO projects, both in the United States and abroad, that we can handle.
Thank you.
Yeah, but yeah, so based on the federal landscape currently, I've heard different things about the SBR, STTR grants and allocation of that money. As you know, and I don't have to tell you this, the federal government is in a shutdown, and that has affected the NIH funding scheme significantly. But our state is not shut down. Our state is still active, and we actually have a great economic development authority. And so we work very closely with those individuals. And if you are doing some of this type of work, you should too. I urge you to do so, because that leadership will change when Kim Reynolds' term as governor expires. So whether you're a R or a D, it doesn't matter. The awards are given based on the innovation of your idea and how much merit it has. So I urge you to apply. Look at the Iowa Economic Development Authority website for deadlines. And there are specific programs. Generally speaking, there's something called a demo fund or demonstration fund, which has a lower threshold and a lower payout. And then there's a match fund called Propel. The principal difference is Propel is a 1-to-1 match, and the demonstration fund is a 1-to-2 match. So you will have to have some money to either have half of that match or a 1-to-1 match. But Propel, I think, is $250K to $300,000, I think, based on how much revenue you've generated. As a general rule, these awards are fairly given. At my other company, we had multiple rounds of funding through IEDA. We had directed phase 2 SBIR grants. So all of these are possible, and I know companies that have just funded themselves just on undiluted funding. It's tough, but you can do it. The only difference is the state money you will hear about on a yes/no basis much faster than you'll hear from an SBR or STTR grant, because that can take from 6 to 9 months on that cycle from application to actually having it in your bank account. And for people who are running startups, that's a long, long period of time. It's a lot of ramen for lunch, so it's a long period of time. So I always urge people to kind of have a high-low mix where you apply for non-dilutive funding, but you also apply for angel investor funding. I think that people, excuse me, who see venture capitalists as a funding source are mistaken or deluded. Generally speaking, unless your company is making $5 million in revenue, no VC is going to touch it. Generally speaking, unless you've floated multiple other successful companies, nobody's going to fund you as a venture capital. It doesn't matter whether you're in Ames, Coralville, Tiffin, Menlo Park, Palo Alto, Santa Monica, Santa Clarita. It doesn't matter. It's all about money. And VC do not want to come in to fund you when you're a tiny little company in tiny little Iowa. If you grow to that size, then yes, you can get funds from both venture capitalists and also other company funds. Those are both possible. Did you have a question, Jay?
Yeah, I wondered if you had extra input on this because I recently learned that in 2027, plain people like us are going to be able to start investing or putting parts of our retirement into these.
Yeah.
And you think the dynamic's going to change now, right? The dynamic might change to be like, you got to be making 5 million to, you got to be making 4 million, right? Like it could just be, it could be a not, is it going to be a not, like, is it going to be a little step, or that's going to be different, or is it going to be a big step? And I have no idea.
Let me try to cover that on both sides. One is there is a goal to kind of open funding sources to what I call non-institutional or non-high net worth investors. So I see, for example, there's a cancer company that is trying to raise money on Facebook. So card-based funding and funding based on people who are not considered by the Securities and Exchange Commission to be what I call high net worth investors. And there's not only a guide, there's actually an application which you can file with the SEC on qualifying for that status. So, for example, right now, we cannot take in money from non-accredited investors because if you do that, that's a violation from the SEC, and it doesn't allow us to file what they call a Form D or a shareholder agreement with the SEC based on how much money people have essentially put in. That probably is in the process of changing because I think that's a pretty rigid network, and that was essentially an offshoot of the Great Depression of the 30s in the 33 and 34 Acts. So I think the definition of angel investor is being changed. Now, the second thing that you said, in terms of amount, that bandwidth, at least in terms of Iowa, it's very difficult to get to that 4 to 5 million range for a seed round or a Series A round. I mean, there are people who have come close. I mean, my friend's company in Ames, I think, raised 3 million. But those people are kind of special unicorns because those people have made a ton of money with their own company before they exited. I mean, his investor is a person from Aldebaran, and I'm sure you guys know about Aldebaran. Aldebaran is also a part of the Danaher network, and they got acquired for, I think, $10 billion or something close to that. So, but in terms of, how you do this type of work in terms of investment, we had an investment syndicate. So we had 26 investors who kind of put in money in different ranges, and all of them were accredited investors, and one was a bank which invested in us because they essentially own the building as a landlord. But, I can tell you that you want to be very careful whose money you take because ultimately you got to file taxes. They will audit you, and they will audit you hard in your first few years. And I think whether, it's employees, like, you've heard in the news of the Des Moines School District, or, money, you want to be very, very careful because you want to do it legally correct. And that's why I always say, get a lawyer who knows how this is done because you want to make sure that they're accredited investors, notwithstanding what type of capital money you're trying to raise. But, in terms of funding now for us, now that we're going concern, there are two priorities. One is what we call a Series B round. A Series B round is generally a multiple of a Series A round. So suppose you raise like 2.2 million on the Series A, you should be in position to raise, say, 20 million on the Series B. Now, you might think that's high, but I heard from reliable sources that there's a company in Madison who wants a $350 million Series B round. So I wish them the best. But, for us, we're doing a 10x multiple, but that 10x multiple now for us is driven now by strategic partners who we now have who want to work with us on product development. So again, to just kind of highlight, three things. One, develop a credible business plan. If you hate writing, find somebody who can do it for you. I notice a lot of people these days use ChatGPT, and it's pretty easy to tell when ChatGPT has done your business plan for you. It's generally a terrible, terrible idea. People aren't stupid, and they know when you see those blue headers, contractions, and then gigantic hyphens, that you probably, popped up ChatGPT and made it crap out a business plan. Please don't do that. Hire a person, take your time and do it. Highlight your unique advantages. All of you are very bright. You should emphasize that. There is some narcissism to making this work. There's nothing wrong with tooting your own horn. Please do that and do that early and often. And show traction. If you have a collaboration with somebody, you have a letter from your school, you have investigators who want to partner with you, you have a letter of intent, early data, all those things help you. And all those things will drive that first check, because in human psychology, the thing is, it's always follow the leader. So if one person cuts you a check and the next person says, has anyone else invested in you? And the answer to that is yes, then I guarantee you will have a fighting chance. If the answer to that is no, you're going to be the first, they're going to say, okay, show me something that makes me want to invest in you. And trust me, we gave about 50 Zoom talks and team talks last year, and that's probably why I'll be permanently hoarse. But it takes a lot of doing, so to speak. But just be patient with it and trust the madness. So my own story, and it's not my own, it's my team's story. So we wanted to fill in the niche where we were a pilot producer for people who wanted biologics. Just before we got on this call, I was just speaking with an animal health company in Kentucky, which wants exclusive rights for a wound healing biologic that they want to build with us. They also want to do some gene editing in the animal stem cell space so they can create allogeneic stem cells for animals. So, these are things that 9 years ago were fictional to us. We did not know that these people existed, but we now know, where this kind of sea is taking us, because it's like a pebble in the river, You put a rock in a river and you want it to flow in one direction, but unfortunately or fortunately, the river has different ideas. So in our own story, we raised $2.2 million in seed and private equity for a Series A round. We put half of that in leased equipment, and then we took the other half and made it into our runway spend. And we wanted to be revenue generating very quickly. And we started to realize revenue within the first 3 months of our flooding event. So now we have revenue that has been generated, and we have deals that are essentially being consummated on a pretty much a weekly basis. So, in terms of our own milestones, we established lab operations within 4 months. And that was a real drag. My colleague was sitting next to me off camera. She will chuckle, but we had people drop laminar flow hoods in my parking lot and destroy them. We had refrigerators that got tipped over in delivery. We had shattered equipment. We had microscopes that broke after 3 months. All of this will happen to you. You just have to roll with the punches and fix it. These are just things that happen in the normal course of business. When I was pulling into the parking lot when the laminar flow hoods were delivered, I said, hey, Sarah, are they installed and working? And she goes, no. And then when I pulled into the parking lot, I noticed that the people they sent were incompetent to install these instruments. And also the lift gate that they had would not support the load, which was literally 1 ton. And they just fell off and shattered on the parking lot. And then the guy said, well, do you want to accept delivery? And I said, do you really think I do? So we called Thermo Fisher, and they were nice enough to replace those hoods within 6 days. So right now we have multiple systems that can make biologics. We would love to partner with people at ISU who potentially have interest in what we do. And we've initiated custom biologic manufacturing services for paid customers and for people who are doing pilot projects towards GMP goals. So, I've kind of told you what we are. We are a gun for hire. We essentially use things for people who want things. When we started this company and wrote our business plan, we said, people will just want stuff off the shelf and we'll just be the next Sino Biologic or Prospect Bio. And the market told us no. And, when that happened, half of me was chuckling and the other half was saying, what do I tell my board of directors during the next board meeting? Because I told them before I raised the money that, hey, we're just going to make a bunch of biologics, put them in tiny vials and just ship them out. And people said, no, I don't want any of that. But I have a protein I want you to make for me, and I want you to make it in Pichia, and I'll pay you X dollars. And I said, oh, this X dollars would beat the revenue I would make by selling 100 of these tiny vials, which nobody apparently still wants. And so we mitigated our risk by doing custom biologic development. And this was something that we wanted to do anyways, but it just became 2 years sooner than expected. So don't be afraid of going where the market wants to take you and where you probably never intended to go, but it'll be a very thrilling journey and might be economically very advantageous for you. Irina, how much time do I have? Am I close to time?
You're very close to your time. Yes.
Okay, so, I will just kind of wrap up here, but, my presentation is available in full, and it can pretty much kind of give you a timeline of what people want to do. I will just tell you that for me and my partners, our next goal is scale up and moving towards GMP and to get more and more CDMO clients. Before I forget, I do want to thank a few people who have made this possible. I would like to thank Sarah Turnus, who's sitting off camera. Sarah is finishing her MD and PhD at Iowa. She pretends to not be educated, but she's the most educated person I've known. And she's completing that with excellent credentials. She's my chief operating officer and loves science. Jay Kamath, who I recruited, is my brother. Jay ran a not-for-profit that dealt with stem cell progression towards rare diseases. In that sense, we helped people who came to Iowa, took their blood, and delivered products made from those stem cells that have extended their lives. JSource is my chief legal counsel, and long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, he ran the legal aid of Story County for many years and litigated more than 1,000 cases plus in the Nevada courthouse in Story County. I would like to thank Steve Hansen, who I think is, either on this call or with an Irish individual who's supposedly one of the 3 world greatest tenors, and who was in charge for business development. Then I want to thank Steve Mikalashek, who's in Canada, who led the seed round and is now positioning the company for the Series B round and our purchase of assets. I would love to leave the rest of this time for questions. My presentation is available in full, and I can send that to Irina so she can distribute that to people, either in terms of slides or in terms of this videotape talk. But I want to thank all of you for allowing me the chance to speak today. And I hope this kicks off your speaker sessions and their speaker season for a great autumn ahead. So thank you, everyone. And, best of luck in your entrepreneurial journey. And I wish you everything, including the greatest amount of success. Thank you.
Anant, thank you very much. Do we have time for a question or two? I see Hussein has a raised hand there.
Yep.
Hussein has a lot of questions.
If you understand all of it, I'm very
Yeah, sorry, my microphone wasn't working. So
all right.
I was wondering this right now, do you have any contracts with the big pharma companies regarding the products that you're producing, or is it right now for basically most involving with the local groups and making some networks and then maybe scaling up?
We have both.
Okay.
Mhm.
And can you mention maybe some of the projects if it's not that?
No, I can't, unfortunately.
Okay.
That's one thing you'll learn in this business is you can't.
Yeah, okay. I understand. Thank you.
You bet. Any others?
Yeah, I have a question. So I appreciate you share a lot of business challenging so far.
Sure.
I wonder for like this kinds of a protein or antibody production, what are the technical challenges your company?
Yeah, I mean, there are many. It depends on the platform. They're platform specific. Some of them are internal challenges that we have IP on, and some of them are involved in terms of scale up. We don't do large scale production. We are boutique protein production and antibody house. And so for us, in terms of scale up, we have partners who can alleviate that price point and that pain point. But I would say to you that the biggest technical challenges are, big proteins are more challenging than little proteins. And then, how do you isolate them and purify them as quickly and cleanly as possible? And that has taken up a lot of science time.
Yeah, when you talk about a small scale, what is the scale you are talking about?
Oh, we've done everything from 250 mils to 20 liters. It just depends on what somebody wants. Mm-hmm.
Got you. Thank you.
But just to kind of, add on to that, we have capacity with our partners to do 100,000 liters.
Mm.
Any other questions?
Okay, if no other questions, we really appreciate your time, your presentation. It
Thank
will
you.
be available. Thank
Thank
you
you.
very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Excellent job.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Have a great day and a good weekend.
Thank you. You
Thank
too.
you.
Bye-bye.